Hi, everybody. This is John Conahan of Athlon Sports, and today I'm here to speak about the history of St. Bonaventure's men's basketball program. Despite being in a small town in upstate New York, there's a lot of history in this program, some very good, some unfortunate and sad, and much more. Some important dates throughout. The basketball program was introduced in 1902. It was actually the last major sport that St. Bonaventure introduced. Funny enough, it was actually mostly football players, and it was coached by a professor, Professor Driscoll. Records of the game were not kept yet at that point. Facilities weren't even introduced until 1906 when Butler Gym was built. Games were canceled. Butler Gym was built in 1916, actually, but the facilities at that point had not been finished. The games were canceled actually until after World War I. So Butler Gym's first game was during the 1919 and 1920 season. Kind of goes to show how much different the world is now than it was, over 100 years ago, and the effect that it actually had on, college basketball, college football, and every other college sport and professional sport. And then basketball was again put on hold, unsurprisingly, in 1942 to 44 due to World War II. Anselm Krieger had took over at the time, but again, the season was put on hold again in a 40-year span, 30-year span, and at the time, the Bonnies were actually called the Brown Indians. They played at Olean Army for the next 20 seasons after the war. Funny enough, or interestingly enough, had 99 consecutive home games at the Armory before February of 1961. So again, just kind of goes to show how much things have changed. Right now, St. Bonaventure has a few home-and-home series where they'll play a team at their place and then they'll play another team, or that same team at their place a year later. That wasn't as big of a thing, obviously, back then. Program, was okay at that point, but they started to find a lot of success in the 50s and 60s under Ed Milkovich. They made the NIT, which, back in the day was a really big success, especially for a small school like St. Bonaventure. And then in 53 to 54, they made the NIT with Coach Donovan, who took duties in that season. So the first actual photo that we could find from St. Bonaventure themselves was the photo of the 1917 team. As you can see here, there are 7 players. That is not typical and just kind of goes to show, uniform-wise, swag-wise, so to say, how much the game has changed. So there's some more important history regarding some success, of course. The Donovan era was considered the golden era of St. Bonaventure basketball. They had made the NIT every year from 57 to 60, and 1961 was the first trip to the NCAA tournament. Again, small school like St. Bonaventure, especially back then, that was like, end-all, be-all. Donovan eventually left for the Knicks, and the program struggled a little bit for a few years because of that. Coach Larry Weiss took over in 61-62. They returned to the NCAA tournament in 1968. Bob Lanier came to town. They lost to Jacksonville after Lanier went down with a torn ligament in 1970. Coaching changes again. That's kind of a prevalent thing throughout St. Bonaventure's history, dating back, the past 100 years. Jim Stalin took over in 73. Made NIT again in 77, but lost in the championship. Team eventually, made the NCAA tournament. In 1979, St. Bonaventure joined the Eastern 8, better known now as the Atlantic 10, which was renamed in 1982. The school also received an at-large bid for the first time to the NCAA tournament in 1990 to 2000 under Coach Jim Barron. Lost in double overtime to a very good Kentucky team, but an at-large bid for a team of St. Bonaventure's, status at that point was, monumental. Atlantic 10 teams weren't necessarily at-large bid teams. So to say, St. Bonaventure didn't win the Atlantic 10, but was still able to get in due to other metrics kind of being there for them. As we have here, we have the 1977 team. This was probably one of the better teams in St. Bonaventure history, led by Greg Sanders. He didn't end up in the NBA, but he did average 22.1 points a game and was the top scorer on the team. Glenn Hagan of that squad actually made the NBA, went on to have a nice little basketball career for himself. But there were some unfortunate things that happened for St. Bonaventure in 2003. Perhaps one of the bigger scandals in NCAA history. But there's a lot more to it than just, what seems like a small thing compared to some of the other scandals. Jim Terrell, he was permitted to play, but didn't complete his associate's degree. So he was ineligible for 1 year. The team had to forfeit every game he played and was banned from the Atlantic 10 tournament. Obviously, money-wise, that's a massive hit to such a small university. Players decided to sit out the last 2 games of the regular season. A lot of mess kind of going around. William Swan, the St. Bonaventure's Board of Trustees, took his life in August 2003 due to feeling like he let his alma mater down by not preventing the scandal. This was, a monumental time in college sports history, right? Because there wasn't much that Swan could have done, but he felt all the pressure that came with it. St. Bonaventure has a great community up in, upstate New York in a small town. And at that time, the town loved their St. Bonaventure's basketball. And it was just a lot for anybody to go through, including Swan, who unfortunately made that decision. St. Bonaventure ended up stripping itself 3 scholarships from 2003 to 2005, and the NCAA decided to put the team on 3-year probation and banned it from postseason play in 2003 to 2004. Very unfortunate time in St. Bonaventure history, but there are some good things coming from them in the next couple of years. Mark Schmidt, the current head coach of the Bonnies, kind of took over the team. They struggled a ton, didn't have a winning record until 2010-11 under Schmidt. They won their first NCAA tournament, or A10 title, in 2012. They ended up losing in the second round to Florida State. First team ever to have an RPI ranking in the top 30 and a conference regular season title to not receive a bid to NCAA tournament in 2015-2016. So that was obviously a huge blow. But it kind of shows how much Schmidt helped the team, get to where it is now. They tied the school record, for 25 wins in 2017-2018. Got an at-large bid that year, which, again, massive for the university. Beat UCLA for the first win in the tournament since 1970. Anytime you can beat UCLA, no matter the program you are, that's as big as it gets. 2021, won their first ever outright A10 regular season title. Open season ranked in the AP poll for first time in a half century. Kyle Lofton went down, COVID came, and it just kind of derailed the team. They lost in the A10 tournament rather early and missed the NCAA tournament altogether, which was, considered one of the more disappointing years in St. Bonaventure basketball history. But St. Bonaventure is currently doing everything it can to become a top mid-major program. They decided to hire Adrian Wojnarowski as its first general manager. Woj, obviously the biggest NBA reporter kind of ever, left ESPN to help his alma mater. Salary difference major, career-wise major change. Woj's job is to help with NIL, name, image, and likeness, which was introduced a few years ago by the NCAA. His job is really to help keep guys, retain them, recruit them, and find money to keep them. Right now, Melvin Council and Chance Moore just hit the portal, probably the Bonnies' 2 best players. And it's important to note, however, that both of them said they'd be interested in potentially coming back. That just kind of goes to show how much Wojnarowski has pull-wise, as those are type of guys who can go on to Big East programs, SEC, ACC, and get, $500,000 for what they did in the A10 last year. But nonetheless, everything is going in the right direction for St. Bonaventure, and it's an exciting time to be a fan. Thanks.